My name is Paul Oliver. I'm the owner of Pinellas Power Products. This is the installation instruction video for version B of the Predator 3500 inverter series generator. Predator has two 3500 generators. From the outside, they look almost identical. The actual insides couldn't be more different if they tried. The way to identify if you have a version A or a version B is version B will have the recoil start and the oil level door on the same side of the generator. Version A will have the recoil start on this side of the generator, and over here would be an oil inspection level door, which you'll see this one does not have, therefore you know this is a version B. Installation is straightforward. We'll go ahead and get started on it. The first step will be to pull this side cover off, and it's held on with two Phillips head screws. These two Phillips head screws are held captive in the cover so that they don't fall all the way out on the ground. So you'll loosen up the screws and then raise this rubber, I call it a funnel or drain gutter or whatever for the gasoline, to where this little flap comes out from behind this. Then the cover unsnaps. Don't lift up too high on this flap or you'll pull out two little snaps here and then you have to put them back in. Then on this side of the generator, you'll pull both of these casters off. I've already slid a 2x4 under the generator to hold it up in the air so that I can take the casters off. But to take the casters off, first thing is you pop the hubcaps off. Then each of the casters is held in place by a cotter pin. It's looking like that. Then there are 3 bolts across the bottom. And these bolts have a fairly large shoulder on them and an 8mm head. Then up here at the top, there are 2 rubber plugs. You'll pull these 2 rubber plugs out, and there'll be a Phillips head screw underneath each of the rubber plugs. We'll go ahead and pull these 2 rubber Phillips head screws out. And these screws are not held captive in the cover. Then if you come around the front, you'll take this screw and this very top screw out. You'll leave this one and this one in place. Then if you come around the back of the generator, you'll take this screw and this screw out. So now you'll have 6 screws with a real small shoulder, an 8mm hex on them, and a Phillips head cut into them. Then we just pull out on the recoil start rope just a little bit. And we'll just let the cover hang down here. So we'll go back to this side. We'll pull off the stock breather hose and just set it aside momentarily. And then we'll pull the valve cover off. And the valve cover is held on with 4 small bolts. Go ahead and pull the valve cover off. Then if you look in the valve cover, you'll see the breather plate, and that's held in place with just 1 bolt. The breather plate has a PCV valve, which is this thin little wafer of steel. So it'll let air go out, but it'll keep it from coming back in. You'll notice that there's a small oil return hole at the bottom. If you do put gasket sealant on it, when you put it back together, make sure not to plug that hole up. There are 2 ways to disable the PCV valve. One way would be to take a pair of needle nose pliers and just bend this small wafer of steel. The other way would be to take one of the zip ties that's included in the kit and zip tie that small wafer of steel against the reed stop so that it stays open. So now you see that the wafer is being held open. Can you see that clearly with the camera? Does that make it worse or better?
That's fine.
Okay. So at any rate, your reed is now being held open. So you'll put your gasket back in place in the top of the valve cover, drop the breather plate Incidentally, the gasket goes in like this with the large section in the upper right hand corner as you're looking at it. Drop the breather plate into place and then put the bolt back in it. We will be putting in a new PCV valve down line, but we want to take advantage of the crankcase pressure and vacuum. If, when you took your kit or your generator apart, if the valve cover gasket is still in good shape, like this one looks brand new. Of course, this generator has not been run much, but you'll see the valve cover gasket looks brand new on it. If you tear the valve cover gasket, unfortunately, I do not have a source for valve cover gaskets for these yet. If Predator starts making valve cover gaskets available, then I will start including a valve cover gasket in the kit. Until that time, the kit is going to come with a tube of Permatex black RTV gasket sealant, and you'll use that to put over the gasket if it was torn in one place. Be careful, like if you rip it right through here, you'll put plenty of gasket sealer right where the tear is, and then just put a thin layer around the rest. This particular one is not damaged at all, and that's mainly because it has such low time on the engine. So now we'll go ahead and put the valve cover back on. As I said earlier, for right now, the kits will come with a tube of valve cover or gasket sealant, and as soon as Predator makes valve cover gaskets available for this version, they'll come with a new valve cover gasket after that. Can you see this well? Is that better or worse?
That's fine.
Okay. And don't forget to put the spark plug back in. Then take the original breather hose, which used to go from right here to here. So you'll pull it off and you'll cut the breather hose. One section is going to be 2/3, the other section will be about 1/3. So you're going to cut it to where the third that went toward the air box is cut off. Then in the bag of small parts in the kit, oh, one thing I forgot to mention earlier, this is a USB flash drive with a copy of the video instruction that you're watching right now. It's included in the kit in case you don't have internet reception where you're going to be installing it at. But then in the bag of small parts, one of the items will be a 3/8 to 1/4 inch reducer. Push the 3/8 to 1/4 inch reducer all the way into this hose. You're actually going to overlap the hose barb. Let me pull that out so you can see better what I'm talking about. Normally you would just push it on to this far, but this hose is so flexible that if you push it all the way over to like this, then your adapter is held in place better. So then you're going to put this hose back in place right here on the valve cover where it used to go, and you'll notice that there is a groove cut into the air box where this lines up nicely with. Then included in the kit is a section of 1/4 inch fuel hose. You're going to cut the section of this 1/4 inch fuel hose 16 inches long. And I'm going to round it up just a little bit because you've got extra hose. So I'm going to cut this 16.5 inches long, and then I'll adjust it later if there's too much hose. So you're going to pull this evaporative emissions line out. It's normally snapped right into this groove. Pull it out just a little bit, and the hose has a radius where it was wound on the spool. So have that radius facing upward. And it'll slide onto the adapter. Here's this if you need a flashlight to shine it and look better. Then just push this into the groove here and snap this back in where it went. This hose can then be routed behind the evaporative emissions canister, like so. The next thing, in the bag of small parts included in the kit, is a T-connector. You'll take the T-connector and slide it into that 16-inch section of hose that you just had. This hose here, all it carries is air. Where it slides onto the valve cover, there's not a significant hose barb. So we're going to put one of the zip ties included in the kit around this to hold that better. Take a break for just a minute. Okay, so we've got the zip tie around this hose right where it goes into the valve cover. You will have extra hose clamps in the kit if you want, and if you prefer to put hose clamps on all these connections here, then go ahead and go for it. But like I say, this hose here only carries air. Okay, so the next thing you're going to do is from the section of 1/4 inch hose, cut a 7-inch section. And I'm going to cut it 7 1/4, just a little bit long, because that way we can always trim it if we need to. And you're going to put that on this portion of the T-fitting. Tuck it underneath this hose from the evaporative emissions line. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and trim about a 1/2 inch off of this because it's more than long enough. Then in the bag of small parts will be the new PCV valve. And if you look very carefully on the side of the PCV valve, there will be a small arrow molded into it. Another way to tell is one side of the new PCV valve is perfectly flat. The other side is cone shaped just a little bit. So you could think of it as looking like an arrow pointing this direction. So we're going to put the side that's flat into this hose, and the side that's funnel shaped right back into this fitting on the air box. So it goes where the original breather line used to go on the air box. Okay, the next thing you're going to do is take your 1/4 inch hose that was included in the kit and cut a 13-inch section. And once again, we're going to cut this just a little longer because it's easy to trim it shorter, as you just saw, if you need to. And this is going to go onto this portion of this T-fitting. Then take the fuel pump that's included in the kit, and you're going to orient the pump where you got 2 ports that are pointing up and 1 port pointing to your right. This port right here with the letter P on it is the pulse port, and that'll go on this hose right here. And then we'll test it just to see if it'll slide right down in here without any problems. Okay, and that's about a 1/2 inch too long, so we'll go ahead and trim that extra 1/2 inch off and do it again. The fuel pump slides right down into the bottom of the generator housing. On this particular engine, I don't mount the fuel pump anywhere because the engine does vibrate quite a bit, and if it vibrates too much, you'll get air bubbles in the fuel and it'll cause the engine to surge. And that still feels like it's just a little bit too long, because if you look at this hose, instead of running nice and smooth like right here, it's got a little bit of a ripple in it. So I'm going to trim off about another 3/8 of an inch of that hose. And that was probably all caused by the fact that I made this hose here about a ½ inch longer, because again, you can always shorten the hoses very easily. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut a 30-inch section of hose off of the hose that was included in the kit. So stretch that out, cut off 30 inches of it. We're going to route this up and straight through to the other side. If you want to go around the other side, you can see where it comes through at. And there's plenty of room in here. So then we're going to come back to this side. And this is the fuel inlet port. And you'll see there's a small arrow on the fuel pump pointing in. Now this hose carries gasoline. So we're definitely going to put a hose clamp on this. As I said earlier, the kit will come with extra hose clamps, so you can put hose clamps on the air lines too, if you wish. Now the reason I ran it over here is you're going to have two choices of where the fuel inlet goes. On this side, remember that there's a door where the oil drain is. And if you put your fuel inlet port right here, just hanging free, it could be hidden right in here to where you open up the door and snap your fuel line onto it. And we'll cover that more when we get to that section of it. Next thing we're going to do is from the section that's left, we're going to cut a 20-inch section of fuel hose. And I'm going to go ahead and cut this a little longer at 21, again, just in case. So you go ahead and lift the fuel pump out. And this is the output side of the fuel pump. And you'll see there's a small arrow pointing away from the fuel pump. We're going to put a hose clamp on that. Incidentally, there's two sizes of hose clamps in this bag here. The ones we're using on the 1/4-inch hose are the larger ones. Then there's 3/16 hose that we're going to be using in a few minutes. So there are 6 smaller hose clamps. Here. So you get 6 small hose clamps, and then the rest of them are larger for the 1/4-inch hose. So we'll go ahead and put this one on the 1/4-inch hose and crimp it down tight. These hose clamps are very easy to use. You just squeeze them down and they lock in place. And then we'll tuck the fuel pump right back into our little slot again. There it goes. Now you come around to the other side of the generator. This is the back of the fuel selector valve. And this particular generator has my wireless remote control installed. So we're going to temporarily remove the choke so that we can get in there a little bit easier. And the choke bracket is held on with this one screw right here. We'll just slide the choke bracket out of the way. And I'm going to put that screw right back into that hole loosely because it's easy to keep track of. And now on the back of the fuel selector valve, you'll see that there's one hose that comes straight out of the back and then another hose back here in the back that's hidden. And they both have Corbin clamps. And I'll show you on the close Corbin clamp how you undo them. You just squeeze the 2 tabs like that, and then the Corbin clamp is loose and you can slide it back off of the hose. So see here, we've slid it back instead of where it normally goes, right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing with this back hose, but you won't be able to see it as well. I'm going to use a longer pair of needle nose to get at this one. So now we've got the Corbin clamp slid back, and now we're going to slide the hose off. Keep in mind, this generator has been run already, so there is fuel in the fuel hoses. Now I've got the fuel selector valve shut to the off position, so you shouldn't be getting a lot of fuel out of that. However, I'm going to go ahead and crimp that fuel line closed with a clamp, and then I'll push it off the back of the fuel selector valve. Okay. And there's the hose that was on it. And you can see where it used to be slid onto this barb on the back of the fuel selector valve. Is it easier to film it from this angle up here? Okay, because what I'm talking about is the one that's hidden in the background here. Right here. One of my fingers against. Okay. Okay, included in the kit is going to be a check valve, a 3/16 T-fitting, and then some formed hoses. This hose carries gasoline, but these are formed hoses and it's not going to leak here. In fact, I defy you to try to get these off of this. If you'd prefer to put hose clamps on it, you can go ahead and go, but like I said, this is a formed hose, so it's not going to be leaking there. This end of the hose goes onto the back of the fuel selector valve where we just removed this existing hose. So I'm going to take it with my needle nose pliers and go behind it and pull it onto that hose barb. And as you can see, it went right on. Is it easier to film from up here? You go right up there like that. And you can see where I've got that hose on there now. Okay. I'm going to take one of the small hose clamps that was included in the kit and put it on here. It's probably easiest to put it on here and just slide it up. And now you can see that the plastic hose clamp is clamped on to this hose where it goes onto the back of the fuel selector valve. Okay, now we're going to take the original stock hose that used to go onto the fuel selector valve, and it's going to go onto this barb of the T-fitting. Like that. We may get a little bit of gasoline dripping out of it. Like I said, it was run before. Okay, we're not getting gasoline dripping out. That's nice. Then we're going to take the Corbin clamp we'll squeeze the two tabs and slide it back over this hose, because the stock hose is a thinner wall than what I use. So their Corbin clamps work good for their stock thin wall hose. As you can see, the hose that I use is much thicker, and it's got a braided section in it. It's Gates Barricade hose. So now we're going to make this section of hose that I just put in, we're going to make sure that there's no sharp kinks in it. It should run in a nice smooth loop. Here's the flashlight at. Okay. So if you look in here, you can see that none of the hoses are wedged in place, and it moves around nice and easily. So it's not kinked. If you come over to this side, this is the hose that we cut to 21 inches. I've got it listed as a 20-inch hose. I've got it cut to 21. Included in the kit is a 1/4 inch to 3/16 adapter. So you're going to push the 1/4 inch side into the 1/4 inch hose, and the 3/16 side into the 3/16 hose to extend this. And we'll get 2 more hose clamps. So we're going to use a 1/4 inch hose clamp right here for the 1/4 inch hose. Then we're going to put a 3/16 hose clamp on the 3/16 hose. Like so. Then we're going to feed it between the drain for the evaporative emissions canister and right under the engine. We're going to pass it behind the engine mount. This right here is the engine mount, so we're going to go behind the engine mount, but in front of the engine, and we're going to pass it over to the other side of the generator. If you come over here, we've pulled it up on this side, and there's our hose clamps, and you can see why I chose to put the hose clamps on while it was still at the other side, because it's a little bit easier to put it in over there. So now we're going to go over here and make sure that all the bends are nice and smooth and no sharp kinks. So this hose runs along the bottom of the generator case and a nice smooth bend. Okay. So now if you come back over here, our 3/16 T-fitting has 1 barb left. And we've got more hose than we need, so I'm going to cut about 1 inch of the hose off because we want a nice smooth bend here. So I'm going to cut 1 inch of this hose off also. As you can see, I do send more than I need as far as parts. So that at your option you can change the location of some of the items. As long as you don't go changing how it functions, everything will be fine. Okay, so now you can see that all 3 of these hoses are fitted onto the T-fitting. And I'll get 2 more small hose clamps. We just want to go through and make sure that nothing is kinked or pinched or anything like that. Okay, so once again, this is the hose that was the 20-inch section from the other side with the adapter, and it runs into the T-fitting. This is the original stock hose that used to go to the fuel selector valve, and in the hose that's on the third leg of the T-fitting was the one that came pre-installed in the kit when it was in the box. When you get everything set in here, make sure that none of these hoses are likely to come in contact with the recoil rope, because the recoil rope will cut them in half. If they are in a position where they're going to cut through or touch the recoil rope, then move them away from it, and if you have to, zip tie them in place. This one right here is being held nicely. I put the clamp to where the retainer portion of the clamp braces against the recoil housing to hold it away from it. If you wanted to zip tie it, like this wiring bundle right here, and add another zip tie around here. In fact, we can go ahead and do that just to show you what I mean. I'm going to cut their zip tie off that they got around just the wiring harness. Put my own zip tie around the wiring harness and the fuel hose. Cut that tail off too and make it look a little cleaner. So now the fuel hose is held quite a bit away from the recoil start rope. Okay, so now we'll take this screw out that we put in here just temporarily and put the choke actuator back in place. You could actually have fit it in there with the choke actuator still screwed in place, but it's just a whole lot easier when you got room to get both hands in there. It just makes it just a little easier to live with. And I'm just making sure that the choke does move freely still. Okay, that leaves this hose. Now you can either, in the kit, you'll have a hose barb and a quick disconnect fitting, and you'll screw the two of those together with hose clamp or with the Teflon pipe tape on the threads. So if you wanted it, and I'm just going to show you this right here hanging down, you push it all the way on, and it's kind of a pain to get it off again once you push it all the way on, so I'm just going to show you this. But you'd push it on and then put a hose clamp and just leave it hanging here. And whenever you wanted to run off the remote tank, you could take the door, open it up, and snap your hose onto that. I'm going to go ahead and mount it right here so that you will have the quick disconnect fitting sticking up out of the top of the generator. And it's going to be at 90 degrees to this surface. So it's going to come up out of the top looking something like this. So with that, I'm going to trim this hose a little shorter. I made it long enough when we originally cut it so it could come out through there, but since I'm going to have it coming up through here, I don't need it that long. Okay. When you go to use the Teflon tape, you're going to wrap it around the threads, and you're going to want 3 or 4 layers of it. Be very careful, do not overlap the edge like that, because what that's going to do is it's going to, whenever you screw it on, it'll cut that section off. That section will get caught in the fuel filter. However, we don't want to go putting debris into the fuel filter unnecessarily. First, what you would do is just take this and tighten it down real tight if you're going to be putting it down there. Since I'm going to be mounting it up here, what we do, I'll take the oil level door off. So we've got a place to hang on to this. And I'm going to set it in place. I'm just going to mark roughly on this cover . Okay. So I've marked where I'm going to drill my hole. And it's the one with the circle around it. You can mark it however you prefer to do it, but just make sure you know what you meant when you make your marks. I'm going to drill a 1/8 pilot hole initially. I use a step drill because it's quick and easy. Don't drill too fast with a step drill, because what it'll do is it'll end up with too big a hole real quickly. I'm going to take the rest of it out with a repairman's reamer by hand, just to make sure that I don't end up with too big a hole. Almost there. I messed up my tape a little bit, so I'm going to take this piece of tape off and start over. we'll do is we'll take this piece of hose, we'll slide it up onto that hose barb. I'm going to take the hose clamp and face it to where the clamping portion is forward. Give me a little bit more room to work with. Take our screws with the small shoulder, put a couple of those in just to hold it in place. Now, if you had yours left it hanging down, where you tuck the oil drain inside the cover, you'd also have access to your fuel inlet. I like them mounted, but that is an option for you. You can just have it hanging down. Take the two rubber covers, put them over those Phillips head screws. Then the three larger shoulder bolts go into the bottom here. Then the wheels go back on the opposite of the way they came off. Let's take a break. Then the hubcaps go on the wheels the opposite of the way they came off. You just line them up, slide them in. The oil level inspection door. Incidentally, this is contrary to what you'd expect. To open it, you turn it clockwise To close it, you turn it counterclockwise. It's a left-hand thread. Don't ask me why. Okay, your last choice here. The kit comes with a fuel filter. You can either cut the prime bulb hose and put the fuel filter in that, which I do not like. I actually prefer to have the fuel filter under this side cover because this side cover comes off with only 2 screws, which makes it easier to inspect and easier to work on. And since, keep in mind, the fuel is going to come in through here, run across, and then down here, the arrow on the fuel filter right here should point in the direction of fuel flow, which will be down. So your fuel filter, if you cut this hose here, will go in this area. And that's the way I'm going to put it on this generator. But like I say, if you prefer to have it outside, then that's entirely your choice. There's 3 little tabs that go into the bottom of this cover. Be careful when you're putting the top on. You'll notice here's a rubber tab that has to go behind the red cover, but in front of the other black one. So we're going to push that in. I can find my screwdriver. Okay. The kit also comes with an additional quick disconnect fitting, and this screws into your fuel tank. Any of the marine above deck fuel tanks have a 1/4 pipe thread fitting, so this will screw right into it. You will hook up the prime bulb with the arrow pointing in the direction of fuel flow, which means toward the generator. You hook the quick disconnect fitting with the icon of a fuel tank onto the fuel tank end, the one with the arrow onto the generator end, pump the prime bulb and fire it up. We're going to take it outside and demo it, but this concludes the installation portion. If you have any questions about this, if you look in the description section, if you're looking on YouTube, if you're looking on my website, you've already seen all the description, but if you just found this on YouTube and you're trying to find more information, the description section has a link to my website. Go to my website, hold your mouse over the word products, it'll drop down a menu. I think the third choice, it starts off with products for Honda generators and products for Yamaha generators, then products for other brands. You click on products for other brands, which will take you to a page with a menu of a whole bunch of generators, and they're listed alphabetically, and this of course is going to be the Predator, so it's going to be near the bottom. You'll click on the 3500 and it'll give you the description of this particular kit. I thank you for your time.